2022 was certainly a very interesting year for Boston College athletics, from a new AD to a football program on the fritz and a basketball program that looked like they were finding themselves to figuring out where they're going next. Hockey loses their legendary head coach, and lacrosse continues to improve. We look at everything and give out our awards on today's Locked On BC End of the Year show.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Boston College, your only daily Boston College podcast out there. I'm your host, AJ Black. I'm the editor and publisher of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 network. Today's show, we are going to look at the year of 2022. We're going to look at the highs. We're going to look at the lows, and I'm going to give out awards for everything. So just to start things off, before we get into our awards, when I looked at this year, if you know me, you know what I like. I'm much more aligned with basketball, football. I watch a little hockey, and I do pay attention to baseball, lacrosse, and things like that. So if my awards are a little skewed towards football and basketball, it's from the perspective I'm coming from. But believe me, there's certain awards that had to go to some sports even I know were the teams that needed it. So let's kick off our awards. Let's look. I'm going to start with the negative. Let's go negatives first, because there's going to be some good awards. There's going to be some negative awards. We're going to start with the negative awards. And this is going to go to the worst moment of the year. When you're looking at the worst moment of the year for Boston College athletics, it's always it's a tough one, because there's always a million different things you could pick from. You could go from basketball losing to Tarleton State, to Maine, to UNH. You could go to football losing to Rutgers, to losing to UConn. And so there's, in baseball, you could just look at their whole season. It was pretty disappointing. But I had to go. I was down to two different selections for this, and it was between football and basketball. Basketball was that first Maine loss. That loss was indescribable, how poorly it kind of just transcended our thoughts about where basketball was going this year. But I didn't pick that. I'm going with football. And our worst moment of the year, and I think you're all probably going to write in the comments exactly what it is before I even say it, is the loss to UConn. This loss was devastating. BC had never lost to the Huskies, ever. They go to Stores, they play in Hartford, they score 3 points. Phil Jakovic is absolutely smashed through this game, as the offensive line can't keep him on his feet. The defense lets up a touchdown to start the game off, and then does fine, but the offense looks as bad. I would argue as bad as it did in 2015 when they lost to Wake Forest in that game that no one can forget. This loss was awful, because UConn just a year ago was one of the worst teams in college football. And I know they made a bowl game, but BC should never lose to the Huskies, and they lost in this game. And I said it before, and I said it again. Going up until this point, you could argue that, yes, the offensive line was brand new, that there was issues with the offensive line, and that you're like, okay, that's the reason why they lost to Rutgers. They lost, to a bad Virginia Tech team. But there were bigger issues here than just the offensive line. Phil Dracovic couldn't figure anything out there. And he was seeing ghosts against UConn, against the Huskies. Now, for Boston College fans, this last 15 years of sports, for the most part, other than some, hockey and women's lacrosse and some, sailing accomplishments, has been rough. Losing to UConn, beating UConn consistently, at least was something you could hold your head up on, right? You could say, oh, yeah, well, when Husky fans are like, whoa, we should have been in the ACC over you and blah, 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 blah. You could say, well, you haven't beaten us before. We've smashed you the last 3 or 4 times, the last 5 years. Well, BC can't even do that anymore. This loss to UConn also made me worry about the future of Jeff Hafley. I know folks got off of his bandwagon at different points. For me, this was the moment where I said, I'm starting to think that maybe he's not the right coach. And we'll have to wait and see if he ever figures things out. But this was a bad moment for BC sports. And we're getting the negatives out right away. Now, our next our next discussion is on the moment of the year, the positives. So I had two for this one. And there, of course, folks could tell me about hockey or lacrosse. I don't know the specific games. They don't stick out to me, so I'm not going to even mention them. It came down to two games for me for BC, and it was the Wake Forest game in basketball when they won in the ACC tournament against a good Wake Forest team. Actually, there was the Virginia Tech game just a week ago when they beat a ranked Virginia Tech team. And then there was the football game against NC State when they beat a ranked Wolfpack team. So in this, when I was deciding, I was looking at what really changed the trajectory of the season. Like, what win was the most exciting? Virginia Tech was exciting, but it was on the heels of some really bad losses. Same thing with NC State. Like, NC State was a great win, but that was after you lost to UConn, you lost to Rutgers. So it was like kind of a bittersweet win. For me, the Wake Forest win really put Boston College basketball on a forward trajectory. Now, they didn't follow up very well with that forward trajectory, but you got to remember, Wake Forest had beaten BC badly just a couple weeks before. Wake Forest was a projected NCAA tournament team. And most people went into this game, myself included, thinking, oh, this is going to be a slam dunk for the Demon Deacons, no pun intended. And what does BC go out there and do? They go out there and then punch them in the face. And they basically dominated this game from beginning to end. And the game itself led to another exciting game, that Miami game, which I if it wasn't a game that was the third, straight ACC tournament game for them, would have possibly been my moment of the year for the negatives when they let up that awful layup just to lose the game. But that being said, that whole ACC tournament gave Boston College basketball buzz they haven't had in years. And that Wake Forest game was the big one because you beat Pitt before. Pitt was bad. Wake Forest was really good. And I can't repeat it because this is a PG podcast, but the moment of the game has to be, there's the big shots they all hit, but it has to be the Wake Forest bench. And the sickos out there, the BC fans that listen know exactly what I'm talking about, where the player mumbled, bleeping Boston College. It ruined Wake Forest. It was a big, big, big win. This had to be the moment of the year. Now, in a moment, I'm going to look at some of the individual performances. Who was the MVP of BC Athletics? Who was the most improved? And who was the freshman and transfer of the year? You're going to want to hear my thoughts in just a moment. But before we do that, I want to make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page. We're getting closer and closer to 700 followers, subscribers. It is absolutely free. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button right now. You're going to get exclusive Boston College videos sent directly to your YouTube page. You get all our stuff. You get to interact with other BC fans and get all that BC content you want. Hit subscribe on our YouTube page right now. Now, we're going to also talk about our good old friends at Bet Online. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college football, bowl season to basketball and the World Cup. They've got it all at BetOnline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline.net as well. The fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Yesterday, I was feeling Kansas to beat Arkansas. That game was absolutely crazy. Kansas pulled off a big time comeback, but lose in triple overtime, 55-53. And I ended up not winning. But when you have a little skin in the game, it's a lot more fun. And you can get over to Bet Online. Head over to their website or use your mobile device to learn more. It's so easy to use. You can get your bets in so easy. Bet Online, where the game starts. All right, Locked On BC, AJ Black here. And we're giving away our end of the year awards. We gave away our high moment and our low moment. Now let's talk about individual players. And we're going to start off with our MVP of the year. And there is no other one. There is no even close number two for this. You could probably pick some of the smaller sports, but I'm talking the major sports here. Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers is the MVP of BC Athletics this year. From the stories from the summer all the way to the last down he played for Boston College, he exemplified everything BC stands for. Now, go back to the beginning of the year where he everyone's joking about Christian Mahogany's video. Zay did the same one last year. Not going to rag on Christian for that because it's still a funny video, but Zay did a very similar one last year. He decides to come back for one more year. Over the summer, we get an article, and I believe it was Pete Thamel of ESPN, that says that Zay Flowers turned down multiple six-figure NIL deals to stay at Boston College because he wanted to finish his education, something that he vowed to his family he was going to do, and that he said that his education at Boston College was worth more than some deal for NIL. If that didn't make you fall in love with him at that point, I don't know what would. He stays at Boston College, and he plays this year. He smashes every Boston College receiving record out there in a season that was unforgettable, and he was the MVP of that team. He became not just a very good wide receiver, he became an elite wide receiver. Pro Football Focus yesterday just had their top 20 or top 15 wide receivers for the upcoming NFL draft. And they had Zay Flowers at number 2. They had him over the Biletnikoff winner, Jalen Hyatt. They had him over Jackson Smith from Ohio State. They had him over everybody, which is quite ironic since Pro Football Focus has spent the last 3 years making him seem like a middle wide receiver. I mean, the grades they gave him are pathetic. So that aside, Zay, in a year that BC football went 3-9, he goes out there and he plays his butt off from the opening snap against Rutgers to the crushing loss at the end of the season against Syracuse. In his last play of the game, he scores a touchdown. He never gave up. He always had a big smile on his face. He always busted his butt. His coaches and teammates always commended him for that. He was everything BC should be about. And we are lucky to have a year where Zay Flowers played here because he was not only fun to see on the field, but he exemplified everything you wanted from a student athlete at Boston College. And we're going to miss him because now he's going off to the NFL. But hey, just like A.J. Dillon, it'll be a lot of fun to watch him in the NFL on Sundays next year. So Zay Flowers is our player of the year. Now, our most improved player of the year goes back to the football team as well. I had another player that I had second for most improved that I just barely lost out, and that was Mekhi Ashton Langford of the basketball team. I thought he came along a lot. He played a lot better from the years prior, and he became, once it came down to that the ACC tournament, he was clutch, and I thought he was a big improvement and turned into a good player for BC when they needed him most. So he was my runner-up for this, but I'm going to go with Elijah Jones. Elijah Jones, cornerback for BC, had an up and down year, but I'm not going to even get to the downs because teams shot at him all the time. They took their shots at him, and he got pass interference calls against him and all that stuff. But the dude was clutch. His percentage of completed passes against shrank tremendously. He became a very solid cornerback, and I think he's only going to get better since he'll be back another year. I liked the play of him, and I thought he got better as the year went on. The more the teams targeted him, the more he kind of locked down. I'm going to give Elijah Jones my most improved player of the year. Now, next is our transfer of the year. And football, they didn't have a lot of transfers. I could have gone with Dino Tomlin. He had some moments, but he really wasn't. He had that big moment against NC State, but he wasn't like a super contributor for most of the season. So I had a hard time picking him. Instead, I went back to the basketball team, and I picked Quinton Post. Quinton Post was a transfer from Mississippi State that had, I think he was averaging like 4 points a game for the Bulldogs before he transferred to BC. And so you're thinking to yourself as you see him like, oh, you know what? He might be a good backup center. James Carnick's here. He may not need him around to play all that much. And so Post, he comes in and he plays very, very well. He scores 9.4 points per game, 5.4 rebounds per game, and really starts to slide in as the center over James Carnick by the end of the year. In the ACC tournament, he has 11 points against Pitt, 17 against Wake Forest, and 14 against Miami. So he comes up big there. And nothing shows what he meant to this program more than what this team has looked like in his absence. Now, I don't think BC would be significantly improved over where they are now, but they might have won 2 of those games. Post hasn't played at all this upcoming year, and he's hopefully going to play against Syracuse on Saturday. I've heard, I see Meter Perel has talked a little bit about him potentially coming in and playing finally. But BC has really lacked his size. He's got energy. He's a very physical player. I think some of the other teams think of him as dirty, but I think Quentin Post has to be our transfer of the year. Now, you've been hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride. Nah, you live nearby. You can make it home. It's no big deal. What are the odds you're going to get pulled over anyway? Even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone? Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel and under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. AJ Black here. We're wrapping up our end of the year awards. There was really, I picked today to do this because there really wasn't any news. Basketball's been off all week. Football, they haven't had any news since the transfer of Tutin and Alex Washington, so it's kind of quiet there. I like to wrap things up and look back at this year, and I think this is a perfect day to do it. Now, I'm going to give out some more awards here to end our show, but before I do that, if you're looking for recruiting and transfer news, head over to Eagle Insider. It's my site. I have updates all the time on our message board and on articles. I have an interview up with a class of 24 tight end, Ryan Ward, who I think is really exciting. I got him up there. I have our projected depth chart for BC basketball football. You're going to want to check it out. And right now it's 50% off, and you get Paramount Plus as part of your subscription. So you're paying $50 basically for the entire year, and you're getting Paramount Plus. It seems like a slam dunk, right? So go and subscribe today. It takes 10 seconds, and you become part of the biggest growing BC community out there. All right, wrapping up our awards. We're looking at our freshman of the year. BC football, they had a few freshmen that played. You got Quan Williams. He played pretty well. Joseph Griffin obviously had the catch of the year against NC State. But I went back to basketball again. And I'm sure there were hockey players. Again, I say this, and you guys can throw them in the comment section about what hockey players I missed. I haven't really been paying attention to hockey in the last year and a half. I'm going to throw that out there right now. I just don't have the time to watch them. And so if there's a hockey one that you think, throw it in the comment section. I'd love to hear it. I'm going with Jaden Zachary because BC brought in a handful of freshmen last year, but Zachary was the name that no one knew about. He didn't even have a 247 Sports player profile until I got to the website and took it over this year because he came from a community college. He was a JUCO that played for Chicopola, I think it was called. I mean, even the fact that I don't even know it tells you what his profile was like. He comes in, no one knows who he is. And he leaves the end of the year as one of BC's most prolific shooters. He's shooting close to 45% from the free three-point line, which is crazy for a team that no one else can do it. Now he's averaging 11 points. Last year he averaged 10.5. He is the best freshman that they have. He brings back a style of basketball that has been absent since Al Skinner. He's great defensively. I mean, he's got over a steal and a half per game. He averages 3.5 rebounds per game. He's a good player, and he's improving on his free throw shooting right now, which is great. So Jaden Zachary is my freshman of the year. I think he is easily the best freshman that BC has seen in a while. Next, we have our coach of the year. And I told you I was going to go with a sport that not many people have talked about. You can go with Jerry York. His illustrious career came to an end last year, but it was disappointing. But hey, he's like coach of the year emeritus at this point, right? I'm going back to women's lacrosse. Again, I don't follow women's lacrosse, and I know they're very good. And that's the point here. because I may not know the ins and outs of that program, but I could tell you this, that they are setting a standard of excellence that is unmatched on this campus. They had a national championship. They got to the national championship last year. They're bringing in talent. Like they're recruiting at a level that's going to continue. This is not just a Charlotte North led program that's just going to continue to be just her. It's going to be this is a unit. This is a group that's going to continue to get better and better and better. So the women's lacrosse team is easily the team of the year because, I mean, who else? I mean, basketball, they didn't finish 500. Football was a mess. Baseball was a mess. Hockey was a mess. The other coach of the year that I honestly would like, it's Acacia Weinstein Walker. Excuse me. It's clearly number one. I think everyone else, other than this other woman, are 3 through 10. And then I would put Joanna McNamee as number 2. The women's basketball team made the NIT last year, which was disappointing. They were like the last team out. They made it and lost to Columbia in a disappointing loss. But what strikes to me interesting with Joanna McNamee as a really good coach too is women's basketball had a very weird offseason where basically their entire team, minus like, you know, 3 or 4 younger players, entered the transfer portal. They lost Taylor Soule, Cam Schwartz, their 2 biggest players. They lost a few other, contributors. And right now they're 11-4 with a whole brand new team. That's all coaching. And Joanna McNamee is a very good coach. So it's impressive that she lost basically all of her stars, still figured it out and got their team. I mean, she got that great recruit out of Canada. They've done quite a bit. So I'm going to put them out there too. And I also want to shout out for moment of the year, the women's volleyball team winning that tournament, that NIVC, I think it's called. Again, I don't know anything about women's volleyball. Hey, anytime BC Sports does well, they deserve a shout out. So those are my end of the year awards. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you do, give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. Or again, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Recommend us to a friend. Your word of mouth is what helps our channel grow, and we've grown quite a bit over the last year. I can't wait to share those numbers when I get them, but they've been coming for quite a bit. So thank you all for listening. We'll be back again tomorrow with another new episode to wrap up the year 2022. This is AJ Black. Follow me on Twitter at AJ Black _BC. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you all again soon.